Good evening, viewers. Thanks for joining me for another edition of Resource PNG. In tonight's episode, we feature key players in PNG's mining industry, Newcrest Mining Limited. We also talk to the European Commission Directorate General for Trade, the French Ambassador, and we hear more from MRDC, as well as the National Development Bank and the Manufacturers Council of PNG. Now let's join Mr. Peter Aitzi, PNG Country Director of Newcrest Mining Limited. Hello, Mr. Aitzi. It's a pleasure to have you join us on Resource PNG. Thank you for making time.
Well, thank you, Antonia, for the invitation.
To start off, for the benefit of our viewers, can you tell us more about Newcrest Mining Limited?
Sure. Newcrest has been in PNG since about 2008. Newcrest is one of the largest gold miners or gold producers in the world, and in terms of its size, I could, as an example, it's the largest company listed on the Port Moresby Stock Exchange. It's the 11th largest company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, so it's a significant company in terms of an organisation in this sector.
Could you talk about your investments in PNG? I understand Lihi Mine is one of them, but you've also got investments in Hidden Valley Mine as well as the Wafu Golpu project. And could you talk more about the tenements in Manus?
Okay, sure. Newcrest has acquired Lihi back in 2010, August 2010. So it owns Lihi 100%, and working with the local communities there and the various sort of partners that we have in terms of the business, the Lihi mine itself is operating fairly well. So that's the biggest, if you like, asset that Newcrest has within PNG. Its ownership within the Hidden Valley mine, we have 50% ownership, and our partners, our joint venture partners there are Harmony Gold, a South African company. We also have a 50% share in the Wafu Golpu project, which is being developed now. And there's still a bit of work to be done in Wafu Golpu, but the signs are promising. So these are the main assets for Newcrest in PNG. We have some exploration being done at the moment in Manus. So the intention there is to develop that and to establish if there's a resource there that'll be able to be taken to production. So those are the main assets that Newcrest has within PNG. Of them, Lihi obviously is the largest and the one that has the most investment in terms of Newcrest's presence here. Wafu Golpu will be on similar terms as Lihi. Hidden Valley is a much smaller mine, so the activity there reflects a smaller mine.
You mentioned that Lihi Gold is Newcrest's major investment in PNG. Could you talk about the gold production there?
Sure. Look, the gold production at this stage is around about 800,000 ounces, and we are currently involved in what we call the MOPU project, which is the million ounce upgrade. Production upgrade, and we hope to complete that at the end of this year. And at that point, we'll be in a position to be able to produce at least 1 million ounces annually on Lihi. And once that's done, it takes Lihi from being a significant mine to a very sizable mine in terms of the gold production that it'll be able to put out.
Are there any community initiatives that Newcrest Mining is involved in, especially in impacted areas?
Certainly, we do a lot of work with the communities, and we understand the importance of partnering with the communities. Now, that relationship is always tested. It's a very sensitive relationship. So we approach our engagement with our communities with a lot of respect and with a lot of openness in terms of what we share with our communities. In terms of the activities that we engage in. Generally, the main areas are obviously business development or economic activity for the communities. In most of our sites, what we try and do is engage the landowners in business activity which supports the mine. And in terms of a return to the landowners, this is predominantly the largest slice of the pie. So a lot of returns in terms of the income generated from these business arms of the landowners. Underneath that, we also have community development projects such as healthcare, support for education facilities, and then underneath that we have infrastructure projects. Give you some examples of that. In Hidden Valley, of late, the MMJV has worked with the Department of Works in upgrading the Bulolo Highway. You'll be aware that over the last couple of months there's been a lot of significant rainfall, and that causes damage to the roads. So Morrabee Mining Joint Venture has invested money into upgrading those roads in partnership with the Department of Works. And the good thing, it's an ongoing process because the rains won't go away, and those roads need continual maintenance. That's part of our contribution to the community. In the area of health, as an example, I'll give you Lihir Health Hospital does vaccination campaigns. It has had a very successful campaign to eradicate yaws, the elephantitis, and that's been very successful. And ongoing treatment of malaria as well, just in the general communities. So generally that's how we engage with our communities. Economic activity, direct assistance for health and education, and infrastructure support.
That's fantastic. Could you give some examples of the economic activity?
Sure. Look, I think many of you would know some of the more successful companies that Lihirians have produced, and I think one of them is the National Catering Service, NCS. That sits underneath a group called Anatua. And Anatua have been very successful in taking the expertise that they've developed in providing their services to Lihir Mine, and having that now transferred to other provinces where other resource companies are operating. Very successful organisation. The other example you could quote is the recent acquisition by Minerals Resources Lihir of an office block in Brisbane, and 2 more office blocks in Cairns, and I think 2 apartment blocks in Lae. So it's the local landowners benefiting from the mining activity within Lihir, and using those resources in a strategic manner to invest and continue the returns continue to bring back profits into the island for the good of their communities.
That's good to hear. Mr. Aitsi, are there any future developments that Newcrest Mining is looking to explore in PNG?
For the moment, I think the focus will be on really developing Wafi-Golpu. I mean, that is the biggest project that we were focused on at the moment, and that's in as I said, joint venture with our Harmony Gold partners. So at this stage, the 2 projects that we're focused on, Wafi-Golpu, to bring that up, to continue to develop that. We are anticipating sort of mining to start in about 2017, but that may be pushed out a little further depending on the work that's required, and we're in pre-feasibility stage now, so there's a number of stages to take us to the point where we can make a decision to invest the kind of capital that's required to make it, to bring the mine into production. The other project that we've got a fairly short timeline sort of attached to is the Mopu upgrade in Lihir. So we want to see that completed by the end of this year, and at that stage we should see Lihir really ramp up its production to the level that we know it can operate at. So those 2 are the main focuses. Beyond that, we've got ongoing exploration around the tenements that we hold at the moment, around the leases that we own, and they will continue to be developed, and we hope that we'll be able to identify further resources in those areas.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Aitsi. This brings us to the end of our interview. Thank you for joining us on Resource PNG.
Okay, thank you, Anthony.
That was Mr. Peter Aitsi from Newcrest Mining Limited discussing the operations and initiatives of the mining company in PNG. More to come after the break. We'll join the European Commission Director General for Trade. Welcome back to Resource PNG. We now join the European Commission Director General for Trade, Mr. Peter Thompson, while he was in the country to discuss more on the role of the European Union and its significance in Papua New Guinea.
Mr. Thompson, welcome to Papua New Guinea.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Thompson, for the benefit of our audience, could you please explain what European Union stands for and what brings you here in the country this time?
With great pleasure. First of all, European Union is a collection now of 27 countries. It started as 6 in 1957, 450 million consumers, a high level of regional integration, a common currency with a large number of the countries within the EU, operating together in trade, competition, and a large number of areas. We have a relationship with the rest of the world. We trade with the rest of the world as a bloc. We are the biggest trading partner. So, European Commission, which is the institution I work for, is like the executive arm of the European Union. It's a civil service. We deal with issues like trade policy, development policy, competition policy, and the like. And I'm here as the director in DG Trade, responsible for, amongst other things, our relationship with ACP countries, and I'm delighted to be back, I might say.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Trade partners with EU is a very important point you mentioned today. Could you emphasize on that as what are the trade agreements, or what is the key trade agreement which is of interest to PNG businesses to be doing business in import and export with EU countries?
Sure. One of the most important things about our relationship is it goes back 30, 40 years. We have something called the Lomé Convention, and that was succeeded by the Cotonou Convention. It's a relationship between a collection of African, Caribbean states, 77 of them to be exact, of which PNG is one, and the European Union, and that's a long-standing relationship. Now, in trade, we had a system whereby the EU would open its markets to ACP countries, but there was no requirement on the ACPs to do anything on their side. Frankly, it didn't really work. I mean, in the late 90s, I think there was a common decision by both sides that we need to do something to help ACP countries become less marginalized in the world, large growth of emerging economies, India, Brazil, and so on, particularly China. How can we ensure that liberalisation would actually help these countries? So what we've done is change the relationship, and that's the nature of what we're involved in here, from this unilateral one to one which is bilateral. So now, in 2007, we reached an agreement with Papua New Guinea, and actually at that time with Fiji, with a view to opening on both sides. Now, we're big and we're developed, PNG is small and still very much a developing economy. So it's an unequal opening. The EU opens its market 100% to all products from Papua New Guinea without quota and without tariffs. Tariffs are the taxes that you would pay on the imported products. That is unprecedented, by the way. I don't think there's any other developed economy that does this. At the same time, Papua New Guinea opens its market to the tune of 80+%, and then keeps a certain number of products protected by having reasonably high tariffs on them, and that enables a relationship to develop over time.
And the very key points you have mentioned in the bidirectional trade during our conversation just now about duty-free and quota-free access of PNG exports or PNG trade into EU, and you mentioned that this is unprecedented, this doesn't happen anywhere in the other developed countries. This is something of very great interest to our PNG businesses, and we would like to know more as how a PNG business can export and what benefits does it get to exporting to EU countries rather than Americas or Australia's, or so how does this agreement benefit PNG business as an exporter?
We're talking about something called market access. So if you wish to export, I don't know what product we're talking about, let's say canned tuna, to the United States, you would have to face some kind of tariff protection in the United States. I don't know the figures off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure they're not zero. Or if they're for zero, they're for a limited quantity. So basically, there is some measure of restriction on the exports of a particular product to the United States, or to Japan, or to China, or to anywhere else. What the EU has done in this special relationship is said, no, we will not have any quotas and we will not have any tax, and that means that the PNG exporter is free to export unlimited quantities of whatever product it has to export to the EU.
And Director, could you please emphasize as what is the future of this agreement? As yes, the PNG businesses can do now from 2009, as you mentioned, but what is the future of these relationships?
Well, one of the ideas would be to say, couldn't we look at the area that's really the lifeblood, and if this is not mixed metaphor, the backbone of any economy, which is services, for example. And there, what do we mean by services? We mean transport, we mean infrastructure development, we mean finance, we mean telecommunications, we mean dredging, one of the industries that actually the Europeans are doing for your LNG pipeline, for example. Even culture and education can be considered a service. So if we find a way of opening a new chapter here, we can do that. We can add to that investment. The EU has just recently come through what we call a new treaty, the Lisbon Treaty. That's a framework within which we operate 27 member states together. And under that, the EU now has responsibility for negotiating areas concerning investment. So we could mutually negotiate something with regard to the rules of investment. What would be the advantage for the Papua New Guinea private operators here would be that they would have, at the end of it, a more stable regime in order to make their investments, in order to facilitate the investment here, because that's crucial to the future. And there are other areas which concern fisheries, which concern development cooperation, which concern sustainable development. There are all kinds of ideas out there. Lastly, and not to try and in any way sink that, the question of what we call regional integration becomes important. We're the granddaddy of regional integration. We have, as I say, our famous 27 member states operating together. In the CARIFORUM, the Caribbean economies operating together, we have a number of countries who've said we'd like to learn from that process. Now, the degree of regional integration in the Pacific is, of course, not as far as CARIFORUM, and certainly a long way from the EU. But the degree to which you cooperate through the Pacific Island Forum or other ways is something that would mean that we can attract in other Pacific Island ACP states.
Excellent, that's fantastic. So in future we can look forward to the agreement expanding to services sector or to development cooperation sector, which will be very vital for the growth of the country, and that is a fantastic initiative taken by European Union on this. Director, as one last point I would like you to as you mentioned in the previous part of the conversation, is liberalization. And this is one thing of very key interest in the partnership agreement as well. It mentions that PNG is committed to liberalize 88% of its of EU imports. Can you emphasize of how this liberalization helps PNG?
Yeah. Let me first of all give you the bad news. The bad news on this is that very often when you talk about liberalization, it means to an industry somewhere, heavens, that means that I'm going to be driven out of business. And it's an understandable fear. The fact of the matter is that 99.9% of the time, it leads to greater economic growth, it leads to diversity in the economy. And most important of all, it increases competition, which then reduces costs, which then feeds into other areas. So, liberalisation